Are we only half alive? Embers drifting in the night, looking, wandering all the time. We seek a kingdom. This is not my home. This skin and bone. The daylight will reconcile the dead and the gone. Let the kingdom come.
Today I want to challenge a belief that many people have about the 12 steps, that they believe that they're only about alcoholism and addiction. This belief is simply not true, and it prevents people from accessing a process that could fundamentally change their lives. I know this not from theory, but from my own experience, my own struggles with not only addiction and alcoholism, but with my mind, with anxiety, depression, fear, and broken relationships, a constant sense of disconnection from everything that mattered to me. For years, I believed that the problem was the visible chaos of it, the drinking, the behaviors, but those were only symptoms. You see, the real issue was deeper. It was spiritual, not religious in the traditional sense, no, but complete disconnection from purpose, from truth, and from God. When that disconnection exists, it shows up everywhere in how you think and how you feel and how you act and how you relate to others. Substances, for me, were not the problem. They were the way that I coped with the pain of that disconnection. And the truth is this: the 12 steps were never designed solely to address addiction or alcoholism. No, they were created as a structured, proven path for transformation, a way to rebuild a person from the inside out. Put quite simply, they were designed as a simple, proven plan of action to take you from suffering to spiritual awakening and closeness to higher power or God. So to understand this, we have to look at where it began. Not in a rehab center, not in a church, but through the work of Carl Jung. In the early 1930s, Jung treated a man named Roland Hazard, who struggled with chronic alcoholism. After exhausting every available treatment that he had, Jung concluded that the problem was not merely physical or psychological, but it was spiritual, and that the only true solution for this man was what he called a vital spiritual experience, a complete shift in identity, purpose, and direction. That insight became the foundation of everything that followed. Hazard pursued that transformation through the Oxford Group, a movement centered on honesty, surrender, and restitution, and alignment with God's will for us. It worked, not because it targeted alcohol, but because it addressed the root causes of human suffering: selfishness, fear, dishonesty, resentment, disconnection. These principles were eventually carried to Bill Wilson, who, after his own spiritual experience, found a new way of living. Alongside with Dr. Bob Smith, those same principles were refined and organized into what we now know as the 12-step program. They did not invent something new. No, they distilled something that was timeless. Between 1937 and 1939, they removed rigid religious language and made this process accessible to anyone by introducing the idea of God as we understood Him. This opened a door for people of all backgrounds, regardless of their religious beliefs. The shift led to the publication of Alcoholics Anonymous, where we find the 12 steps and where they're outlined. This partnership between Bill Wilson and Bob Smith in 1935 is widely seen as the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. But what many people do not realize is that in the beginning, what they were doing was essentially an extension of the Oxford Group and the work of a Christian minister named Frank Buckman. They were taking those same spiritual principles of confession, making amends, prayer, surrender, and helping others, and applying them specifically to people struggling with alcoholism. because it was the biggest problem of that time. For the first few years, they were deeply involved in the Oxford group meetings and followed its structure very closely. But as more people began coming to them for help, something became very clear. The strong Christian language and structure of the Oxford group was turning people away. Not because they didn't need help, but because they weren't comfortable with organized religion and didn't share the same beliefs. Between 1937 and 1939, Bill Wilson and the early members made an important shift. They didn't change the principles, they changed how they were presented. They simplified and organized this process into something more structured and accessible to anyone, while removing rigid religious language. One of the most important changes was the introduction of the idea of God as we understand Him, influenced by a man named Sam Shoemaker. This allowed anyone, regardless of background or belief, to engage in the process without feeling excluded. This was a turning point. The principles of the Oxford group weren't abandoned, they were refined, they were made available to everyone. And in 1939, this transformation was finalized in the first publication of a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, where the 12 steps were formally laid out as a clear step-by-step process, a guidebook, if you will. While the book was written for alcoholics, the steps themselves were far beyond that. This guidebook guided a person through something much deeper: admitting powerlessness, developing a belief in a higher power, surrendering control, taking a fearless moral inventory of themselves, admitting wrongs, making amends, and growing spiritually through prayer and meditation, as well as helping others. These are not just tools for quitting drinking, my friends. These are principles for completely changing how a person lives, how they think. When you really look at it, addiction was never the true focus. It was just the most visible symptom of a deeper issue, the spiritual disconnection. The steps weren't designed to simply remove substances, they were designed to rebuild a person from the inside out. That's why this process works for so much more than just addiction. It works for anxiety, for depression, for broken relationships. It works for trauma. It works for the everyday struggles that we as society face. Because those things are, at their core, came from the same place: a disconnect from purpose, a disconnect from truth and from God. The reason that so many people misunderstand the 12 steps is because they were first introduced through Alcoholics Anonymous. And over time, people began to associate them only with AA and alcoholism. But historically, that's not what they are. They are a universal spiritual framework, one that can be applied by anyone who is willing to follow the process. And at its core, the 12-step program is a powerful combination of three things: the psychological insight that real change requires spiritual awakening, the practical spiritual principles taught by the Oxford group, and the real-life experiences of people who applied these ideas and found lasting transformation, lasting recovery. The shift that happened between 1935 and 1939 didn't change the truth of these principles, it simply made them available to the world. So to say the 12 steps are just about alcohol or addiction is completely missing their purpose. They are about awakening. They are about transformation. They are about restoring a relationship or gaining a relationship with God or higher power. And ultimately, they are about becoming the person that you were meant to be. What makes this process so powerful is simplicity. It does not require perfection or having everything figured out. It requires only your willingness and openness to follow a path that has consistently led people out of darkness and into the lives of purpose, peace, and connection. No matter how far someone has fallen or how far broken you may feel, there is a way back, not just to where you were, but forward into a life that you may never have believed possible. The only question that remains is whether or not you are willing to take this step with me. If you're feeling resistance to anything that I'm saying to you right now, then let me ask you a question straight up. What if that resistance isn't because this is wrong, but because you've never actually tried it or experienced it yourself? Think about that. What if the reason you don't believe in the power of the 12 steps is simply because you've never really gone through them and experienced it? Not halfway, not intellectually, not picking and choosing parts of it. I mean doing the work all the way through, all of it, with honesty, with humility, with a real willingness to change. Because here's the truth. Most people don't reject the step work because they don't work. They reject them because they've never truly tried it. So if that's you listening to this, then let me challenge you. Wouldn't you at least owe it to yourself to try this before dismissing it? Before you walk away and stay exactly where you are, stuck in the same patterns, same thinking, same suffering, same pain, I'll make you a deal right now, right here. If you go all the way through these steps with me in this series, the way they're meant to be done, if you complete all of the work, honestly, fully, without holding back, and you don't experience a shift, you don't experience a spiritual awakening, you don't see change in how you think about yourself and your addiction and how you live and how you handle your struggles, then you can just walk away, no questions asked, and I'll refund your misery at the door. But I'm telling you right now, that's not going to happen if you're willing, because I've lived this, I've walked this path as you are today. I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people do the exact same thing for years and years. And as a result, freedom was the answer every time. Every time. Not perfection, not easy, but real, undeniable change. So the promise isn't a theory. They're not motivational talks here. This is real. This is how it shows up when you do the work. The truth is, people don't fail at this because it doesn't work. They fail because they don't fully commit to it. So the question that I have for you, and I'll leave you with this, is are you in?
Are we only half alive? Embers drifting in the night, looking, wandering all the time. We seek a kingdom. This is not my home. This skin and bone. The daylight will reconcile the dead and the gone. Let